can be financially stable without ever feeling financially safe. And I think that's one of those contradictory things that you don't understand until you actually live it. Maybe because when you look at your life now, it's better than what it used to be. A stable job, higher income, lower debts, more savings, or perhaps you just become more adept on knowing how to handle whatever life throws at you. On paper, that is evidence that you're financially stronger. And yet, the emotion don't always follow or catch up fast enough. You may still check your account, even though you know exactly what is in there. You plan a purchase that you know you can afford and make sense, and yet you still experience that jolt when you actually make it. Or maybe it's a savings goal that you have been working toward for months, and you finally get there and you're super excited for 5 minutes. And then it slowly creeps in and you set a new goal so you don't allow yourself to relax. And that is always another number, right? You tell yourself when the emergency fund is bigger, when the mortgage is lower, when that particular loan is paid off, when I have enough in retirement, or when everybody I love is actually okay, or when the economy stops behaving like the economy does. The problem is that life is not especially cooperative with that type of plan. There is always something that you can save for. There is always a risk that you can reduce. And there is always a perfectly reasonable argument why the number you have is really not the number you need. So the line keeps moving. And financial security is something that you become very good at building, but never able to experience it. And I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to say that you're good, that everything is fine, that you're perfectly safe, and that you can finally buy the one thing that you've been putting off for the last 6 months. Sometimes caution is the right answer. Sometimes you're really in an uncertain situation. What I'm more interested in is this. What about if your situation has truly changed, but the rules you have learned about money are not changing along with it? What if part of you responding to the realities as it is now, but there's another part of you that is responding to the life you used to have, which didn't allow room for error? Those two things can feel almost identical until you slow down and actually separate them. And that is what this conversation is all about today. Not how to spend more, not how to save less, just how to tell whether the feeling of financial insecurity is describing the present or whether part of it is still repeating the past. You can become financially stable without ever feeling financially safe. That does not mean that you are ungrateful, irrational, or somehow bad and enjoying your life. Sometimes it just means that your circumstances change before your internal rules did. Maybe the numbers are the result of your circumstances today, but you're still responding to a life that didn't leave any margin for errors, no backup plan, and no one there that could pick you up if you needed help. And if that is where your caution came from, it makes absolute total sense why a bigger bank account does not ease your worries. At the same time, I do not want to romanticize uncertainty or pretend that fears are old. Cost of living is real. Health expenses are real. Family needs, job changes, and the unexpected that may come our way can affect a woman very differently depending on her support system and the resources she has available. There are moments when holding more back is not an old script. It is very sound judgment. So the useful question is not, why can't I just relax? The useful question is, what is my sense of security responding to? Is it responding to facts that are in front of me right now? Or is it reacting to something that I experienced in the past or that I see somebody else live through? Because until you separate those two, the past and the present can both sound like responsibility. Maybe money was unpredictable when you were growing up. Or maybe that lesson came later, when you lost a job, when a relationship changed, when medical expenses started piling up, or perhaps through a season where there was no room to get anything wrong. However it happened, you learned to pay attention. You learned how to stretch, save, and anticipate, because knowing what was coming next and being prepared mattered. And I think it's very important not to blame that part of you, because that part of you may very well be the reason why you're here today. Checking your account consistently, questioning every expense, or aggressively saving may have been the only way you could make it through the season you were in. The real question is not whether those habits were good or bad. It is whether you need that same level of authority today. Because something that protected you in one season may not necessarily carry you forward in the next. And this is where it gets more personal than just spending or savings. Because over time, that habit can become intertwined with who you believe you are. You may be the responsible one, the one that doesn't waste money, the one that plans ahead, the one that doesn't ask for too much, or that doesn't assume someone else will pick up the pieces. There is a lot about that identity that deserves respect. It can represent resilience, independence, discipline, and years of making thoughtful decisions when making such decision was not easy. But even a useful identity can become restrictive if it doesn't allow new information to come in and condition it. If being responsible means you always have to prepare for the worst, being simply calm can feel careless. If every purchase had to be practical, pleasure can start to feel suspicious. And if being prepared means that the amount you need to save is always growing, then no number is really ever able to feel complete. And I think that is where the word enough deserves a little more attention, because we use it as though we all mean the same thing by it. The problem may not be that you value security too much. The problem may be that security was never actually defined. You might have a savings goal in mind, but you don't know what should change once you actually reach that number. Is it meant to cover a period without income, protect you from a particular expense, let you retire with dignity, give you the freedom to make a choice you could not have made before? Those are real purposes, and money can be incredibly effective when it is connected to something concrete. Money can buy time, option, care, distance, breathing room, and the ability to make decisions with not quite as much pressure. It can make a crisis more manageable, or it can allow you to leave when you are in a situation where you don't want to be in or is not safe to be in. But sometimes we expect for money to do one more job, and that is to never feel pain again, to never feel uncertainty again. And no number can do that. Money can create protection, but it cannot make life completely predictable. It cannot promise that everyone you love will always be okay, that no loss will occur, or that you will never make a decision that later on you wish you would have handled differently. So if financial stability means eliminating uncertainty, enough will always move. Life is very good at imagining one more thing that you should be preparing for. And perhaps that is the exact distinction. Sometimes the number is not failing to provide the security, but it is asked to provide certainty. That does not mean that you're going to stop planning. It just means that you're going to become a little more precise about what are you actually planning for. There is a difference between saving for a purpose and savings so that you do not feel unsafe. There is a difference between choosing not to spend and feeling like you cannot spend. And there is a difference between caution that comes from current facts and caution that comes from old scripts that you learned and you never questioned. Those distinctions matter because the same financial decision can look the same from the outside, but come from two very different places on the inside. Two women may both decide not to buy something. One looks at her priorities and decides that the purchase doesn't fit. And she's perfectly fine with that decision and moves right along. The other woman can readily afford the purchase, and the item that she wants to purchase will actually make an improvement in her life. And yet, she's not able to spend the funds because that makes her feel irresponsible. The answer is no in both cases, but it's not the exact same no. And I think that matters because the unscripted choice is not to actually make that purchase. This is not about proving that you're free to spend money. You may look at your finances and decide that waiting is actually wiser. You may prefer a larger cushion, a more conservative plan, or fewer financial obligations. You may simply value more what you're saving toward rather than what is being offered in exchange right in front of you right now. That can be a deliberate, reality based choice. The question is whether you're making that choice now or whether the answer came to you before you even had a chance to actually ask yourself that question. Because sometimes no is an actual decision, but sometimes no is an old rule answering on your behalf. Old financial rules rarely feels like old rules. They tend to sound like facts. Something always comes up. This is not the right time. Responsible people stay prepared. And money spent on yourself could probably be put to a better use somewhere else. And some of those things may be true. The interesting thing is when the answers stay the exact same, even when your realities and circumstances have changed. At that point, it may be worth asking yourself, is this rule still applicable? Or is it just good at repeating itself over and over? You do not have to throw the old rule out, but perhaps you want to let the present have part in the conversation. What is this money meant to make possible right now? What would this choice actually cost you? Is the discomfort pointing to real consequences? Or is it just that you are unfamiliar with it? You may end up with the exact same decision you would have made anyway. But the difference is that now you know why you're making that decision. There is another part of financial security that almost never gets named because we tend to focus on how much is in the bank account. But sometimes the fear is not just that the money will run out, but sometimes the fear is that you do not know what you will do once your life changes. You may worry that one bad decision could undo years of hard work, or that relaxing your discipline may result in the collapse of your entire system. And if your financial stability only feels safe when you are constantly vigilant, well, that stability becomes very fragile because apparently the whole thing depends on you never getting anything wrong. But good judgment is not the promise that anything bad will never happen and that you will never make a mistake. Good judgment is the ability to see what is happening, respond to reality, adjust when necessary, and make the next decision with better information. That kind of self-trust is not as comforting as a guarantee, but it is far more realistic because guarantees are in very short supply. You can do everything right, and that still does not guarantee anything. And maybe that is where the quiet shift happens. Security may partly come from what you have built, but part of it also comes from trusting the woman who built it. Not because she will always know what to do, but because she has already made a lot of difficult decisions, adapted to changing circumstances, and learned things that she did not know before. The careful part of you may still have a very important role. She may notice risk that other people will miss. She may protect goals that have a deep meaning to you. And she may remind you that current comfort should not automatically outrank future needs. You may not need to get rid of that part of you that is being careful. She may be one of the reasons why you're here today. But perhaps she may not need to run every single minute of your life and every single decision you make. Because caution deserve a voice, but not permanent control. So maybe the deeper question is not whether you have enough. Maybe it's whether you know what enough make possible in your life. It may mean to have real protection against an emergency, greater independence, a secure retirement, the ability to care for someone you love, or knowing the money will not be the reason why you need to stay in a situation that you no longer wish to be in. Those are meaningful form of security. But I also think there is a quieter definition of enough. It is the ability to make ordinary financial decisions without turning each and every one of them into judgment against what kind of person you are. You can still be careful. You can still decide that the answer is no. But maybe responsibility can include your present life too. Rather than treating every bit of comfort, health, beauty, or enjoyment as is something that has to defend its own existence. Not every desire should turn into a purchase. It just deserves to be considered before the decision is made for you. So here is the one practice I want to leave you with today. And it is intentionally simple. The next time a financial decision creates that familiar sense of unease, don't force yourself to say yes. But also do not assume that that feeling means no. Just slow down the decision long enough to ask yourself three things. What is true now? What are you protecting against? And what rule seems to be speaking? Maybe what is true now is that the purchase fits comfortably within what you planned. What you are protecting against is the possibility that another expense could arise later. And the rule speaking is that money spent on you is always the least responsible use of it. Or maybe what is true now is that the purchase really will interfere with something important. In that case, the discomfort is not an outdated script at all. It is useful information. The point is not to talk yourself into a more exciting answer. It is to hear the difference between what is happening, what you fear may happen, and the rule that may be trying to decide before you do. And if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is still no, also great. The goal is not a particular answer. The goal is to be honest with yourself. I do not think that financial security comes in one clear moment where you realize nothing else can go wrong now. I'm not even sure that life works that way anyway. Maybe it looks more like knowing what you have, knowing what you're preparing for, what matters to you, and what fears are describing today versus the past. You do not have to stop being careful. And you do not have to prove that you're free by spending money. Also, you do not need to treat every hesitation as something you need to overcome. But the life you have worked so hard to stabilize deserves to be acknowledged as actual present evidence. If your circumstances have changed, that does not erase what you have learned in the past. It just means the present gets a vote too. And maybe enough does not begin when every uncertainty is gone. Maybe it begins when the present is finally allowed to count. So if the conversation feels familiar, perhaps that's the question that you can carry with you this week. When I think of financial security, am I responding to the reality now? Or is there a part of me that is still responding to how things used to be? Come back next Saturday for another honest conversation about the scripts that have shaped our lives, often before we even realized they were ever there.
Thank you for being here, and see you next episode.